Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, September 3rd, 2020. Time for yet another show. That's what we say in the beginning of each show. I guess we're done now. I don't know. Now I get out of the way for Greg Dworkin to tell you what happened in the news, and I read you a crazy story from a week ago. Okay? Just so you're up to speed on things. You can go now. I want to make this as quick as possible because we are urged in Bill's morning tweet. The other thing I need to do in the morning is to remind you not only that we are, of course, live now with Daily Coast Radio, but that I, Kagro X, David Waldman, urge you to listen twice. In fact, once live and once as a recording, just to make sure that the system controlling your ears is working properly. Sure, it's a felony and you'll land in jail, but suck it up, Buttercup. That's what we have to deal with today. The president spending his day yesterday, apparently. I think I missed this one in live, in real time, but I managed to catch up by the evening. You did too. I know it. I heard about it. I heard you hearing about it, as a matter of fact. It's herd immunity. We all heard about it at the same time. The president spending his time in North Carolina telling people that they should vote twice. His supporters, of course. Vote twice, vote once by mail, and then go live and cast your ballot in person just to test the system, apparently. This is his idea, I guess, of getting out of encouraging, some sort of charge of encouraging vote for it. I mean... He can escape that charge by instructing his attorney general not to charge him with it and then pardoning himself for it later on if he prefers. But that's how he spent his day. And, you know, Twitter and Facebook and all the other social media platforms will pretend either he didn't say it or he didn't say it on our platform, so it's okay. It is something that I think if he had tweeted it, and I guess I don't put it past him to tweet it sometime today, although my guess is that if he tweets about it at all, he'll be about how it was all a joke and he was just kidding. But if you tweet that normally on Twitter and you're not, alleging that you are the president of the United States and you can't convince Twitter to believe you, then you would have your account locked and you'd be forced to delete that tweet as election misinformation. But I guess we just don't do that to to people who will scream and cry about it and then use the power of the federal government to try to punish you. I can understand the trepidation, I suppose, although if I were sitting on $1 billion, I don't know how much more scared maybe a little bit less scared about that if I was sitting on a giant pile of money. But it can happen to you. Putin kills his oligarchs from time to time, so I suppose there's something to worry about. We are past 190,000 COVID-19 deaths this morning, according to Worldometers, which tends to run a day or two ahead of the totals that other people feel more comfortable waiting for. Johns Hopkins or the New York Times or somebody else who uses Johns Hopkins data to declare us to be at 190,000. But as you also know, if you go by excess deaths, which you should, we're way over 200,000 now anyway. But my official count leaves us at 190,000, according to Worldometers, which keeps us, I think, on track to hit 200,000, as though it was some sort of magic number, on or about September 11th. So I guess the only thing that I'm disappointed in is that if people insist on waiting for the 200,000 mark to be acknowledged by Johns Hopkins on September 12th or maybe the 13th, it may lose whatever mystical power it had, if there really was any, for the two dates to coincide. But 10,000 or so away from hitting 200,000. You'll recall that at one point in our recent history, that was one of the more outrageous numbers that Donald Trump wanted you all to bow down to him for not hitting at some point. This was, I guess, back in late April. Of course, my marker here is Jared Kushner telling everybody that the Trump administration's response to the coronavirus was a great success story, a story that wasn't being told, and it really had to get out there. And, of course, 140,000 deaths past that now, and it's a substantial number. Trump and Trump supporters escaping blame or attempting to escape blame for this by circulating and recirculating this strange idea that, only people who are either elderly or have underlying comorbidities are the ones who are dying. And so really, CDC has, as they say, quietly revised its numbers such that they are reporting that only 6% of the reported coronavirus deaths are, in fact, due to coronavirus and nothing else. But we've debunked that kind of 100 times over. And it's also not new, and it's not a revision. I mean, it's something that they're trying to emphasize, but it hardly, makes a difference. Of course, lots of people have drawn parallels. If somebody with terminal cancer, catches a cold, well, then they don't die of the cold, do they? Well, I don't know. I mean, it's also not a new thing, as somebody else has pointed out. Comorbidities, I mean, there's a word for it. It's a term for it because it's a common thing, and that's just kind of the way disease and illness works all the time. It's not a new indictment. It's not a smoking gun, as somebody said. Being ill or having some underlying health issue does make you more vulnerable to disease. But the disease has to come around and, let's say, sweep the globe or rage across the United States without control, spreading without limit among community members such that it can reach you and kill you. If it doesn't exist, of course, then you're just walking around with an underlying comorbidity. The point is you're walking around. Anyway, I don't know. For some reason, Trumpsters continue to respond to the fact that now 200,000 and I guess going on 250,000, we'll be working our way up to 250,000 between now and election time, are dead. And they just tweet 6% at you now. All right, fine. So learn to ignore that. I'll share a couple of threads with you. Somebody who put the comorbidity thing in a nice context, the latest one anyway, that I can share with you. Greg, of course, will tell you all about it, but he's been over that subject. So here he is to go over a totally different subject. I'm going to have to manually find my Skype. There it is, but at least it's ringing this time. I did remember to conduct my usual morning test so that I'm able to say right now, good morning, Greg. And now I'm going to do that. Good morning, Greg.
Hey, good morning.
See, it worked. I knew it. Okay, how are you doing? I bet there's some stories out there that we should probably pay some attention to. Soup,
and a few
haircuts,
polls, but I got a good one by Norm
polls.
Ornstein on how to fix the filibuster I thought you might be interested in. We'll get to that in the second part of the segment.
Yeah, all right.
Because, you can't do polling all the time, but there was just a crap ton of polling yesterday, and so we really have to spend a little bit of time on that.
Yes, that's metric. Crap ton.
Yeah. Nate Silver and the 538 site do a good job of rounding all this stuff up. And in one of his tweets yesterday, he put this whole electoral college popular vote thing a little bit in perspective.
Okay.
Because one of the things I really get sick and tired of hearing is, the national polls don't matter. Well, of course they do.
Yeah.
They matter tremendously. And the reason they matter is that, yes, we choose the president by the electoral college, but there's an incredibly strong correlation between how the national popular vote goes and how the battlegrounds are going to go. And so he actually put up some numbers. He's a numbers guy. Okay, so the chance of a Biden electoral college win.
Biden electoral college win.
Biden wins the presidency if he wins the popular vote by this many points. Okay, so if it's a 0 to 1 point popular vote victory, Biden's got just a 6% chance of winning the electoral college. The electoral college advantage to Trump comes in when you have a very, very close race.
Yeah,
a Gore-Bush level race.
Yes, I see.
Okay.
That it's an overwhelming advantage to the Republicans on that one.
Right. 1 to 2 points, Biden's chance jumps up to 22%. And at 2 to 3 points, it's 46%. So it's still basically only a 50-50.
Yeah. Which is
at 3 to 4 points, it's 74%. At 4 to 5 points, it's 89%. At 5 to 6 points, it's 98%, and at 6 to 7 points, 99%. So a 5 to 6 point lead is essentially Biden wins. And a 4 to 5 point lead is Biden probably wins. So under 4, you start to get into 74% territory. Under 3, you get into 50% territory. If somebody has an 8-point lead, don't talk to me about the Electoral College. It's irrelevant.
I guess not. Although you can talk to me about it in terms of, well, a 1-point lead should be a win. Why? What is this 6%?
Yeah, well, but it's a different conversation.
Yes, true. But I like that.
Completely different conversation. I like that conversation, but just understand what it is you're saying.
Okay.
And right now,
I'll get around to
Biden's
that
got a 7.5-point lead after all the conventions are finished and after all the polls are in and said and done. Let's put it this way. It's not just the 7-point lead or so. Okay?
Well,
it's a lead that's been pretty steady the entire time.
Right,
okay?
True.
And as Nate points out, you'll sometimes see people say stuff like Biden has to win the popular vote by 3 points or he's toast. Well, actually, at 2 or 3 points, it's a toss-up. So just keep that in perspective.
He might be toast.
Right. Okay. So yesterday, good thing folks didn't wait for quality state data, and they looked at RCP averages and a Bloomberg story that said that, there could be an overwhelming shy Trump vote that doesn't exist. And Fox News polls come in. Arizona, Biden 49, Trump 40. North Carolina, Biden 50, 46. And I think we have a Monmouth poll in North Carolina today coming out around 11. Excuse me. And Wisconsin, remember Wisconsin, the whole focus of, oh my God, riots are happening. Crucial. Biden 50, Trump 42.
Okay.
Right? Well, and Jonathan Martin adds also the gap between the wishcasters and the bedwetters who jump at everything and the actual Republican and Democratic pollsters who shrug this all off and say it's a steady race, that gap is large.
Okay.
Well, so in fact, summing up, one of the points that Nate Silver also made on Twitter was looking at the live caller polls.
Okay.
And they're still considered the gold standard because they've been around longer and people feel more comfortable. That doesn't mean that they're actually the gold standard, but we treat them as such because that's our benchmark. And all this opt-in internet stuff is all new, and we just are not totally comfortable with it yet. But the opt-in panels and the internet polls actually have been very stable, as have the live callers, but the live callers have varied a little bit. But yesterday, IBD tip, Biden +8. CNN, Biden +8. These are all live callers.
Okay.
Quinnipiac, Biden +10. Suffolk, Biden +7. Seltzer, Biden +8.
Okay.
Okay. And so IBD tip and CNN, I think, were registered voters versus likely voters. And so that's a 1-point difference. So you take those 8 and you make them 7. And what you basically have is Trump running between 7 and 9, which, by the way, is where he's been running the entire time. Then you start digging into the crosstabs a little bit. Aaron Astor, historian, put these together. And it's kind of interesting. The 7 national polls released today and yesterday that included crosstabs by race.
Okay.
And remember what we've been saying. Biden needs to hit white vote 40.
Oh, okay.
Democrats don't win the white vote. They just have to keep it close.
All right.
Right? The average margin among white voters is 49 to Trump to 45 for Biden. 49.1 to 45.1. That's a 4-point lead. In 2016, Trump won the white vote 57 to 37.
Yes.
A 20-point margin in 2016, a 4-point margin now, which tells you why Biden's in better shape than Clinton was.
Yes. All right. Okay. Congratulations.
Because there's a lot of white voters.
Some white people. Yes, that's true. They live everywhere. The country is filled with them.
Right. So next we have Christian Vanderbrook. pointing out also that Mark Kelly has a 56 to 39 point lead over Martha Mcsally in that Fox poll.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah.
And he makes a very interesting point. He says it's fascinating that there's virtually no public panic among Republicans about cratering support in the suburbs or once reliably red states like Arizona. Now, the suburbs and older voters over 65, Trump's losing there, or at least losing voters, even if he maintains a slight lead with older voters. It's not clear about that, but in some of the polls, he's actually losing those older voters. That is the Republican base, and the Republicans being quiet about it is pretty fascinating. And the speculation there, he says, I don't think it's because Republicans think they're going to pull a rabbit out of the hat or win or something like that, or shenanigans.
What do they think?
Okay. I think it's because establishment Republicans have resigned themselves to whatever happens, and there's simply no incentive to raise the alarm. I mean, the party was broken before Trump, he said, and it's even more broken now. Just, they're going to lose, and they're shell-shocked, and there's nothing they can do about it. So just, like, suck it up and take the hit.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, or maybe, I don't know what it is exactly that's driving it, but if it were a coordinated thought in the heads of Republican strategists and activists, I guess it wouldn't be, I guess it's not a bad idea. We're constantly yelling at one another. Why are you bringing up this or that problematic issue or worrisome statistic? You're depressing the vote somehow. And I guess they may be saying, well, why discuss negative news? That's sort of a Trumpian approach to things. Don't talk about it. Have a positive attitude, and something will happen. I'll steal all your money, but something will happen.
Right. Again,
come out at the
some
end.
of these capsule tweets, and this is what I love Twitter for. You know, it takes the 1,000-word article and just distills it down to like what's going on.
Yes.
David Farris, political scientist. Today's polling confirms Biden's probably been up 7 or 9 points since June. Nothing has moved those numbers much, and nothing's especially likely to. Think of it another way. Generic Dem has an 8-point lead since Trump was elected.
True also.
Right?
It's almost like...
And so sometimes you need somebody formal and with stature and gravitas to make this point. And this is an article I overlooked last week, but I love it, so I have to bring it up now. August 25th it was written. Okay? Charlie Cook, who knows a thing or two about elections.
All right.
The title, Many Are Afraid to Say It, but this is not a close race.
Okay.
Well, I could tell you what the article says, but that's what the article says.
Oh, all right. Well, yes, you don't need. That's one of those headlines. Okay. Right. Yeah, we've been talking about that story, and it's remarkably stable as well.
They have the whole Emperor's New Clothes stories. Charlie says, I think the story in the context of this election, but not in a way that compares Trump to the king. Rather, I think about it in terms of the political analysts. The pollsters, the pundits refuse to state publicly what the data plainly show. It's a very unlikely Trump win.
Well,
all right, so blame the election of 2016. Virtually everybody but the most diehard Trump backers that year felt he would lose. Few forecasters thought it was possible for a candidate to lose the national popular vote by over 2 points, nearly 3 million votes, and still win enough states to reach 270. You had to go back to 1876 when Samuel Tilden won the popular vote by 3 points but lost the electoral vote 185 to 184. And between 1876 and 2016, the popular vote in the Electoral College diverged only 2 times. 1888 with Grover Cleveland and Al Gore, of course, and George W. Bush.
Okay.
And then there's
Samuel
Trump winning
Tilden.
Michigan by 0.2 of a point, the first Republican to win there since 88. He repeated defeat in Pennsylvania, again, not won by a Republican since George H.W. And where were the polls off in 2016? Michigan, Pennsylvania, and also Wisconsin. Okay, and that was because nationally there was a slight oversampling of whites with college degrees, and since then most pollsters have begun to correct for that, weighting white voters by level of educational attainment. And just this week, Pew Research released a report that guides state-level pollsters because they basically taught everybody how many college-educated people are in each state, so you could use those to match your polling numbers and do your secret sauce and make it all match.
I see.
So there are things that could tilt this race: shenanigans at the Postal Service, voter confusion about how to vote, inability to process ballots. But the race has got to get much closer before these can possibly make a difference in a few key states. It's like with the Electoral College. All of that is true. When you got a 1 or 2 point race, you got to worry about everything. When you have an 8-point race, you really don't have to worry about any of those things.
Yeah, okay.
Trump was the candidate of change in 2016, says Charlie. Now Americans are very unhappy with where the country is and how he has handled the tenure. How does an incumbent, and again, he's an incumbent this time, How does an incumbent prevail in the face of this? I don't see how the reasons why Trump was underestimated then apply now. Shoes on a different foot. So I'm going to be like the kid saying the emperor has no clothes. A focused and disciplined incumbent president could climb out of this hole, but not one who too often seems to be his own worst enemy.
Right. I don't think I could envision him climbing out of anything.
I think yesterday's show, we went over the fact that Biden is actually leading Trump on law and order. If you want to keep your lawn in order, it looks like Biden's the guy to go to.
Lawnmower kid. He knows what to do.
Yeah, exactly. So, everything that people say, including Van Jones' latest, that the riots are only going to help Trump, except the polling says the opposite. It's one of those, look, the pundits are just, some of them are just like wrong. They're just wrong. Just say it.
Well, yeah, right. For one thing, what riots? It's one question you might ask, as people are asking around the country now.
So let me talk about the Lincoln Project a little bit and Lincoln Project fallout.
All right.
Okay. Mike Madrid, who's one of the Lincoln Project guys.
All right.
Like he's not a politician you'll recognize. He's not a pundit like Rick Wilson that you'll recognize, or Tom Nichols maybe. But he's more of a staff kind of guy. So he's got a series of tweets. Lots of polls today. Quick thread on the new Quinnipiac poll, one of the ones that came out. Quinnipiac is very favorable to Biden, so I didn't concentrate on that one. I just wanted to look at the bulk of polling. Mm-hmm. But he does, and he says, at the moment, Trump is losing on job approval, on coronavirus response, and making people feel safe in their communities, and most of all, head-to-head with Joe Biden. 15% of Republicans say the country is worse off than 4 years ago, and among independents, at 60-36. Okay. Trump is losing 65-plus college-ed white voters in approval on the economy, COVID, overall job approval. The trends over the last 5 months have been that voter views on the pandemic and overall job approval are more strongly connected to who the voter will likely break for in the general election than their economic views, which is the only area that Trump still barely has an edge over Biden on. It's not the economy stupid. It's the pandemic stupid.
Oh, we have a lot of pandemic stupid around.
That's my comment, not his. But, I've been saying that for months, as you know. Is Trump having an effect with his law and order message? Not the way he thinks. 59% of college-educated white voters say that Trump make them feel less safe. He may be running up the score with non-college white voters in the Rust Belt, but he's pushing more and more suburban voters away in order to placate his base and drive a false chaos message. More importantly, this issue is flattening the race, pushing more Sunbelt states in play. Sunbelt has a higher share of college-educated whites turned off by dog whistles, and Biden is just about on par with where Clinton was among black voters, but is leading 56-36 among Latinos with the provision that pollsters not focused on Latino voting, like Latino decisions generally get Latinos wrong. Biden absolutely must make up the gap with Latino voters, something we're paying very close attention to. Head-to-head still shows Biden +4 among 65-plus and +31 among college-educated white voters. Trump still leads with 50 to 64-year-old voters in much of this poll. You know that's my, what's wrong with you? You grew up with Reagan and you're still dumb about it group of people. Yes. And 60% of voters have been or know somebody who's gotten infected. 60%. Really? 60%. That's an amazing statistic. Big question. When people begin voting this month, will they be thinking about the chaos message Trump hopes will drive non-college whites away from Biden, or will they be thinking about Trump's incompetence and failed management of the pandemic as illnesses rise again and permanent business closure and unemployment set in? We have to remember Trump's doing everything possible to undermine the election. We can't give him and his neighbors a single inch. We need a high turnout. We have to stay vigilant. 62 days to go. That was yesterday. We can see the whites of their eyes. We know all of that. The fact of the matter is, he's done, I'm not, that there's a lot more going on here. And again, it's sports and school. Yeah. And every parent knows the pandemic isn't over. And of course, it's the major issue. What do I do with my kids? My schools are changing their policies every week as somebody gets infected. The idea that the chaos of a month ago is somehow or other going to be the driving force of the election is crazy. And that's why Van Jones is such a bad pundit. So how does this play in real life? You have these Lincoln Project people, Project Lincoln people setting up the permission structure for Republicans to endorse Biden, and there's a longer list every day that does that. And today, and this is one that caught me completely by surprise because I never saw it coming, in Detroit Free Press, Rick Snyder, former governor of Michigan, I'm a Republican voting for Biden.
Okay. In crucial
Snyder,
Michigan.
Who saw that coming? Donald Trump is a bully who lacks a moral compass. Joe Biden would bring back civility. Now, in comparison to Trump, Snyder's okay. He's no bipartisan guy like Kasich. He's a lot more partisan, although people in Michigan tell me he's not always what his image says he is. And people in Michigan personally like them a lot more than they like some of these other guys. He brought a couple of former congressional Republicans with him in that announcement.
Votes are nice.
And that's fine. But the point is he's really bringing the Chamber of Commerce types. And the Chamber of Commerce itself is starting to endorse Democrats this cycle, which is making the congressional Republicans really, 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 really angry with them.
Well, congressional Democrats would approve more PPP loans, and I think that the Chamber of Commerce would be interested in such a thing. I mean, there are millions and millions of people without jobs.
Right. And so there's all these small things going on in addition to the big picture of whether or not Joe Biden goes to Kenosha today or tomorrow or yesterday. He's going today. But Biden's doing all the right things. He's hitting all the right notes, and it's showing up in the polls. And Trump is currently losing.
Okay, well, good. He deserves to be losing. And, I guess, on this topic, I guess our friend Dana had a nice tweet that summarized it nicely. Remember, kids didn't finish school last year in the classroom because of coronavirus, but they won't start school this year in a classroom because of Donald Trump. So, once again, bringing it back to the pandemic, and there's your chaos story. When you kept talking about chaos stories, I thought millions unemployed, people being evicted, kids can't go back to school, people can't go back to work because the kids can't go back to school. That feels like the chaos story to me.
Right.
Okay. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Greg is still with us. I meant to finish up in our conversation. Not heard off the air because we were doing commercial break. Yes, that's true. Yard signs do vote. You know, I was going to tell you that. I understand there are virtual yard signs now. This is how important they are. Apparently, everybody who's not, I guess, doesn't have a care in the world and is playing video games all day is playing the hot new one. Remember, a couple of years ago, it was, Farmville, and then Pokemon Go, and that was a stupid joke that Hillary Clinton made about Pokemon Go to the polls. Now everybody is playing something called Animal Crossing, and the Biden digital team has, no comment. I don't know whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, except it has yard signs in it. They made little virtual yard signs. You can put them on your virtual lawn, wherever animals are crossing. I don't know what Animal Crossing has to do with yard signs, but apparently people who play the game think that's cute and funny, so good. So there you go.
Yeah,
yard signs win it all.
So we have some senatorial polling. I mentioned that Mcsally is a big lead in Arizona. There's a Harper poll, which is a Republican poll, showing a fairly close race in Minnesota with Tina Smith winning by a couple of points. But they happen to also have polled the presidential race, and there they have Biden up 3 points over Trump in Minnesota. We know Minnesota is going to be close. Minnesota was very close last time. This is not a surprise. But if a Republican poll and a Republican pollster has Biden up by 3, chances are Biden's up by 3 or 4, or maybe even a little bit more. It's a close state, certainly not one that should be taken for granted. But it's important because it turns out that there was some sort of an internal memo or discussion, or may have been public, from the Trump campaign saying how they think they can win. They basically have to keep Florida, and then they have to take one of the three of, the Rust Belt Triumvirate, which is to say Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Now, Michigan looks a little stronger than Pennsylvania does at this particular point in time, which is why Biden was in Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh when he had his Trump is causing the riots speech. And by the way, I've never supported getting rid of fracking. That was strictly Pennsylvania aimed. So, given the closeness of the battleground states, and that's why they're battlegrounds, it seems, at least at the moment, that it's a very, very difficult. And in addition to keeping Florida and flipping one of the three classic blue wall states, they also have to get Minnesota. So Minnesota's in play on the Republican side. It's part of their strategy to win. So it's good to keep an eye on Minnesota, and it's good that Biden is well aware of that and planning to go. Again, this is the time of year where armchair political analysts all give Biden advice on what he's supposed to be doing. And this is where Biden ignores them and does what his campaign thing is, and listens to his political gurus in terms of what he has to do. But he's well aware of Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin. He's not ignoring any of them. And he's going to Wisconsin. So, none of this, well, they never go to Wisconsin. But he's going to Wisconsin. He's going to Wisconsin today.
Well, they have a crucial county, I understand. At least one.
Yeah. Well, it's all part of the plan there. Another close race in the Senate that is definitely worth keeping an eye on. This is a story by, again, a political scientist. I love following them because I think they're just a little bit less partisan than and a little bit more informed than some of the pundits. This one is what the polls say about Lindsey Graham versus Jamie Harrison. It's in Newsweek.
Okay.
Not my favorite magazine these days, but they get these freelancers who come in and write stuff. And the bottom line, if the article is too long to read, is simply that Jamie Harrison is close in all of the polls, raising a ton of money, and actually is well positioned for an upset.
Well, all right.
So if you're sitting back and saying, well, who do I send money to? Is it John Ossoff in Georgia? Or is it Iowa because I can't stand Joni Ernst? Or, of course, is it because I can't stand Susan Collins? So I'm going to send it to Maine. But consider South Carolina.
Okay. I mean,
as well as Al Green in Alaska and some of the other potential upsets there that could really help the Democrats win the Senate, which is vitally important because even if Biden wins, the Senate will block everything.
Yes.
There'll basically be no judges. If Biden wins and there's a Republican Senate, things are going to grind to a halt like you never saw before, not even under Obama.
You sound like Trump when you say that. I know that just upsets you, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm over it. I mean, so just in one of those things
not
to
that
keep in
much.
mind.
Okay.
And how does the Senate work there? There's this great article by Norm Ornstein on one of David's subject matter expertise here things. So I'm bringing it up so David can talk about it, not because I'm the expert. But it's in the Atlantic. It's called The Smart Way to Fix the Filibuster.
All right.
Okay?
We'll see.
And the problem with the filibuster is, of course, it doesn't let you get anything done. And in order to change the filibuster,
yes,
don't you need 40 votes or 60 votes rather?
Yeah, sure. No. Well, no, actually, on no front. But I mean, we learned recently, of course, you don't need a supermajority. But if you were a believer in the rules and that things can only change according to the rules, you still would need 67 votes to invoke cloture on a rules change. It's even harder.
Mm-hmm.
So, one smart way of fixing the filibuster is just saying, "Shut up, you idiots! We have a majority."
Yeah, that's one way.
Yeah.
But you could formalize it. So the way Norm writes it is that you'd need 60, but, we have Tester and Manchin and Sinema and Doug Jones, if he wins, who've already said they're not into changing the filibuster. And so you could change your minds. But as we know with voters, people don't really change their minds. You just have different people come in and out of the lineup. That's what happens with independents and so-called swing voters. It's not the same swing voter.
Sure.
That swing voter didn't change their mind. They didn't vote last time. They voted this time. It's a different swing voter.
Yeah, that was an important point early on from
right. Well, same
Rachel
thing happens with votes in the Senate. You don't really change people's minds. You can change your senators. That works really well.
True.
Like flip the majority, for example.
Yeah.
But what to do? So Democrats need a backup plan in case they can't just put the rules change through.
They can't, but all right.
So the rule in the Senate for legislation, that is, if a filibuster is conducted, 3/5 of the Senate, or 60% or 60 of the 100 senators, must vote to invoke cloture.
Yes.
Which means stopping debate and moving toward a vote.
Right.
Okay. So why don't you just change the rule?
Okay.
And say that you need 40 to continue.
Sure.
Right. And if you don't get if the minority can't get 40, then then you continue.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's the
same thing, but it's just easier to do. It's always easier to get 40 votes than 60 votes.
Yes. Well, you should, at the very least, it was like the idea with the talking filibuster. Put the onus on the people who want debate to continue to show up and insist that debate continue. It's a backwards. It was a backwards system to begin with, not just that, but also even the existence of the so-called existence of the filibuster rule. There is no rule that says filibuster or anything like it. But yeah, we have this weird backward system where the people who want to affirmatively get forward to a vote are the ones who have to stand around trying to get things done, while one person can hold the floor and the rest of the nuts trying to hold things up can go take the rest of the day off. Flip it. Yeah, they got to have their 40, and they ought to have their 40 on the floor at all times.
Right. So the way Norm puts it is instead of 60 votes required to end debate, just require 40 votes to continue it. Mm-hmm. That's all. If at any time the minority cannot muster 40 votes, then debate ends because you didn't have the votes to continue, and cloture is invoked, and the bill can be passed by the votes of a simple majority. And that'll preserve a unique feature of the Senate, preventing it from becoming the House. Because everybody hates the House. It will not allow Democrats to pass everything, but it will stop the filibuster from standing in the way of necessary, broadly popular initiatives. So that's his solution.
Okay.
And, if you can't get the traditionalists to go along, you might be able to get them to go along with that.
You might. I mean, it's a good idea, the step toward it. I mean, I guess, I'm sure it's in here in the article's entirety. But, of course, in order to get that rule change adopted, if you want to adopt it as a formal rule change, you would need 67 votes to invoke cloture to get that rules change. But I guess what he's saying is you might be able to get 50 Democratic senators, even if there are a couple who don't want to abolish the filibuster. You might get their votes for switching this rule by majority vote. But I guess even then, so formally you're talking about adopting a new precedent.
But with the majority, you can do that, but only if you have your entire majority voting with you, I guess is the point.
All you can do at that point, formally speaking, all you can do at that point is ratify a new precedent of a new interpretation of the existing standing rules, which would be awfully different. I will say it would be, I guess you could do anything you want. Do whatever the hell you want. It would be a little tougher sell to, I don't know who, if you find somebody who pays attention to these things, to say, yes, we are looking to get 50 votes for interpreting the rule that says you need 60 votes to invoke cloture should be read as, actually you don't, you need 40 votes to prevent cloture. We're going to read the actual opposite of what these words say, and that is an intelligent interpretation of the rules, and I will vote for it on the record.
Right, and for those of you who are not familiar with congressional hardball, what if the parliamentarian says that's ridiculous? Well, you keep firing them until you get one that says, oh, that actually makes sense.
Yeah, or if you like them, you can say, that is really funny. That's great.
Thanks for saying that.
I love that line. It's terrific. I really appreciate it. No. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is, if you're going to play hardball, you can do this.
Yes, there's no reason to love this particular parliamentarian either, but why not? Go ahead. If you like her, you can keep her. Just tell her she's wrong. Or you're right, but you lost today.
Yeah, or something along those lines.
You know.
So
come back
Norm
tomorrow.
entitles it
Chin
the
up.
smart way to fix the filibuster. I guess what he's saying, and what you've pointed out with the talking, is this: there's a number of ways to get around this, and this isn't the only solution. But the main thing is to lower the number of votes you need, to get stuff passed. And so everybody's thinking about this because not everything in the world can be done through reconciliation.
Right. Very little can be, unless you just say to hell with the rules.
In which case, you don't need to do this.
Really. There's a lot less writing that needs to be done on.
What the hell with all of it? We're just taking voice votes and everything from now on.
Sure.
We're going to streamline it and bring it up to the 21st century.
Right. It'll make people very something. Maybe nothing at all. I don't know.
Yeah, all votes will be done on Zoom, but the minority is muted.
People would understand
because it's a rule.
Right.
We just passed the rule. What are you going to do about it?
That would be great. Has anybody ever thought of just gaslighting people on Zoom calls and just say that somebody's on mute when they're clearly not, and have the person
great.
going, "I
You get
can't
all
fit.
sorts
What the?
of
I'm hitting
cursing
all the
going on.
buttons."
You see
God
that all the
damn it.
time in the
Yeah?
in the Senate. It happened on Ron Johnson's.
Oh
committee.
yeah,
It's great.
right. Oh yes, and who was? And somebody was shouting about that. I can't remember which senator it was. God, using all the language that we try not to use here. But he wasn't originally muted. But I was thinking if you could just fake tell people that they're on mute and see what happens. All right, I just caused a lot of chaos. People got
Just these are things that are worth keeping track. And then my final article for today is by Eric Levitz, which is a sobering one. It's from New York Magazine, and he's pretty good. Eric is.
Oh, okay.
And let me just throw this at the end because I don't even think I have it on the list. Maybe I do.
It's so new. You haven't even listened.
Many GOP voters value America's whiteness more than its democracy.
White.
In Donald Trump's America, democracy dies in broad daylight.
It's white.
One explanation for Russian indifference, Republican indifference, Russian indifference, no difference. Republican indifference to such deeds is that Republicans aren't aware of them, like Fox News, so like nobody knows. But a new paper from Vanderbilt University, political scientist Larry Bartell suggests an alternative hypothesis. Many Republican voters value, quote, keeping America great, end quote, more than they value democracy. And by keeping America great, they typically mean keeping America's power structure white. In a January 2020 survey fielded by YouGov, a slim majority of GOP voters agreed with the statement, the traditional American way of life is disappearing so fast we may have to use force to save it.
Well, I mean, wow on a number of levels, but all right.
Right? Nearly three-fourths agreed with it's hard to trust the results of elections when so many people will vote for anybody who offers a handout.
Okay.
Right? More than 40% agreed that a time will come when patriotic Americans have to take the law into their own hands, and more than 47% concurred with the premise that strong leaders sometimes have to bend the rules in order to get things done.
Handout.
And on all of these questions, most of those who did not agree were merely unsure. In our age of polarization, anti-democratic sentiment isn't confined to the right. One 2017 survey asked whether violence would be justified if the opposing party won the election, found a slightly higher percentage of Democrats, 18, agreeing with the sentiment than Republicans, which was 13, which was relatively low on both sides. Still, there's nowhere near as much open advocacy for illiberalism among Democratic elites as there is among Republican ones. And whether for high-minded or self-interested reasons, there's only one party that routinely seeks to restrict the franchise. And for these reasons, anti-democratic opinion among GOP voters is of greater consequence than that among Democrats at the present moment. So what ideological or cultural forces lead Republican voters to subordinate democracy to their desired political outcomes? The study entertains some possibilities by examining the answers that YouGov's respondents gave to other survey questions. Bartels explored the degree of correlation between 6 voter dispositions in anti-democratic sentiment: partisan effect, enthusiasm, cynicism about actually existing democracy, ideological commitment to economic conservatism, commitment to cultural conservatism, and white ethnic antagonism. And that last category refers to a voter's level of concern about the political and cultural power of non-whites in the U.S. For example, if respondents agree things have changed so much I often feel like a stranger in my own country, that discrimination against whites is as big a problem today as discrimination against blacks, and speaking English is essential for being a true American, they post a high score on the ethnic antagonism scale.
Yes.
Okay, and applying the method to all 6 variables, he found that ethnic antagonism is a better predictor of a Republican's indifference to democratic niceties than anything else. Or in other words, the 2016 election wasn't about economic anxiety.
Ah, finally.
Right? Notably, well, I added that piece. Notably, what Bartels calls cultural conservatism, essentially attitudes on all culture war issues except those concerning race, is actually negatively correlated with anti-democratic attitudes. In other words, a GOP voter who espouses average levels of ethnic antagonism, partisan effect, and support for Trump, but exceptionally high levels of cultural conservatism, is less likely to agree that defending America's traditional way of life justifies force.
Maybe that's
In fact, more so than the average Republican. This suggests that popular support for authoritarianism within the GOP is not animated primarily by concerns with conservative Christianity's declining influence, but rather with that of the white race.
Yuck.
Okay? White skin, burning cross, KKK, history in America, Reconstruction, all of that stuff still evident. Across the past, that's me adding, what he says is across the past half century, the U.S. has shed its official caste system, and almost all white Americans have made peace with sharing the polity with people of other phenotypes. But forfeiting de jure supremacy is one thing, handing over de facto ownership is another.
Okay. I mean,
a majority of light-skinned Americans may value their republic more than their tacit racial dominance, but sometimes minorities rule.
Okay. Yeah, this is
so very sobering. And so when you look and see what happened in Kenosha, for example, with a teenager having an assault rifle, feeling like he was totally justified in going to somebody else's town and shooting up somebody else's town, on the basis of defending what exactly? Folks, wasn't law and order he was defending.
No.
Nor are the militias there because they're simply trying to support the police because they believe in law and order. That's not what's going on here.
No. All right. Well, yeah, that's a, like you said, disheartening piece, but...
well, it means that after we win, we still got a lot of work to do.
Yes, that's true.
And don't expect all the problems to just go away because, Obama won and he's black, therefore we're fine.
Oh, I thought that was there was a big Supreme Court ruling that said that was all over.
Yeah, well, and don't expect all the problems to go away because Joe Biden's a nice guy.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people in this country that aren't so nice.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah, I was very interested in... All right, well, this gives me some ideas about what we can do with the second half of the show as well.
Well, good. That's my job.
Yes.
I spend the first hour talking so you can figure out how to do the second hour.
Right. If this show were reversed, we don't know what we would do.
I know.
Okay.
Anyway, that's it. So I'm done.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. Maybe I'll get an early start on this. I'm not certain that what I have in mind absolutely follows, but the point is, no one can stop me. Even Abby doesn't even. Abby can't try. Okay. Well, that's fine. All right, we can roll with that. And let's see. Today's Thursday, so that means we won't. We won't see it till Monday. But it is Labor Day, so I suppose.
Yeah. What are you doing on Monday?
I try not to labor. Anyway, I'll be doing that. Ordinarily, I go and roll out a show anyway because it's fun to stay at home and listen. Except now nobody's leaving for work anyway, so I don't know. Well, I think we'll go ahead with it. Why not? Besides which, I imagine this will be another exciting weekend that we'll need to catch up with. If we took Monday off, we'd never get there. So if you'll be around, I'll be around. And, okay. Well, here, I have a note here. Abby is barking, so signing off. So that's fair enough. We'll see you on Monday and hear you, Abby, on Monday. Have a great weekend. I hope there's a lot of squirrels between now and then, and you have a great time. Okay. So... where were we here? We were talking about, it was what Greg put me in mind of here, pardon me, was with our Kenosha shooter. Are we naming him? I mean, everybody knows his name now, but I think Greg was exercising his judgment in passing on naming this person because he would just enjoy that too much or something. But But I guess we will end up naming him because I was thinking of reading a piece that discussed eyewitness accounts to what happened from the local paper. The most major nearby paper, the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. And I skimmed through this the other night, and I thought it was very interesting. It seems to, it speaks, I think, to, pardon me, that question of where does this idea come from of that it's okay to do what this kid did, or that you don't need to fear, say, being gunned down by police walking down the street with an assault rifle and people on the sidewalks pointing to you and yelling to the cops, that guy just shot somebody and you need to arrest him. We've all had, I think, a pretty clear concept of what that was all about since the day it happened. But this eyewitness recounting of things is sort of interesting. So we'll break the rule here because the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel does, and we'll blame it on them instead and talk about, mention the name of our shooter here. Witnesses described the night Kyle Rittenhouse, that's the kid, opened fire during protests after the shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha. Gina Barton is the writer here. I don't know who made the decision on using the shooter's name either in the headline or the body of the piece, but I don't hold it against them. That is a fact, and you can report it. I will excuse it. But this is real interesting. So it's told the first witness here is a participant in the demonstrations, but a bystander to the violence that erupted on. So here we go. Jeremiah is his name, and I don't know if he gives his full name or not, but Jeremiah just wanted to find his car and go home, but he was trapped. A massive line of police in riot gear had just forced him and hundreds of other protesters out of Kenosha's Civic Center Park and into the street. After that, there was nowhere to go. Soldiers and cops blocked one end of the road. White guys with big guns blocked the other. What are they even doing there? Etc., etc. Whole discussion to be had, by the way, about the fact that, no, they're not there to keep peace. They're there to find an excuse that they think will allow them to shoot people, if not just shoot at them, to actually shoot them and get away with it. And that's kind of what they're there to do. They've bought these guns or stolen them, and I'd like a chance to use them, please. That's why they cross state lines to do these things. Anyway, it was past 11 p.m. Tuesday, the third night of the protests, after a Kenosha police officer shot Jacob Blake 7 times in the back. Jeremiah had received a text from a friend saying a bunch of protesters had their tires slashed. He wanted to get to his car before vandals did. He decided the quickest path was to cut through a parking lot. And by the way, just so it doesn't pass unmentioned, who would be slashing the tires of protesters? Other protesters? No. Of course, it's the guys with the guns, and they slash the tires of the protesters, figuring, who's going to stop us? We have big guns. Besides, the cops are on our side. They're giving us water. Anyway, as he made his way toward it, the car, Jeremiah saw more armed white men. 2 crouched on the roof of a building, sniper style, because we're just protecting things. 2 or 3 others stood guard over the lot. One of them, a baby face with a backward ball cap, raised an assault rifle and pointed it at him. Jeremiah, 24 and black, was more annoyed than afraid. He'd been out protesting all summer, more than 90 days so far. He knew about these guys and their scare tactics, and he refused to be intimidated. When the kids started yelling, Jeremiah shouted back, "I'm trying to get out of here. If you're going to shoot me, just shoot." Which is dangerous because he might actually do it. A few minutes later, Jeremiah saw the same guy, same kid, pointing his weapon at someone else. By the way, against all of your supposed gun safety rules, but there you go. All right, a few minutes later, Jeremiah saw the same guy pointing his weapon at someone else, and this time Kyle Rittenhouse fired. Jeremiah was on hand to see that shot fired. Rittenhouse, 17, has been charged with 5 felonies and a misdemeanor, just to throw that in there, after shooting 3 people Tuesday night, 2 of them fatally. His lead attorney, John M. Pierce of the law firm Pierce Bainbridge, has said he plans to argue self-defense. And by the way, somewhere, I think buried in my list of tweets, is an amazing assertion of not only self-defense, but apparently John Pierce asserts that Kyle Rittenhouse has fired the first shot of the second revolution. He actually was comparing him to, the militiamen at Lexington and Concord, which is insane. But he's a licensed attorney, apparently. I don't know. Show me the paperwork, I guess. It hasn't happened yet. Guy says he's an attorney, and I don't know if we should believe it. Information here about how they reported their story, but I think we probably get the idea here. So I'll just jump back to it before we take off for our second break. That night had felt different from the start. Among protesters, the rumor spread. Hundreds of white men with guns had answered an online call from a self-described militia group known as the Kenosha Guard and would be waiting in the park to shoot them. Not nearly that many armed men showed up, but they were impossible to avoid. Some, this is interesting, joined the marchers and pledged to protect them. I don't know why anybody believed that, and many protesters still felt more afraid than secure, and I can't blame them for that. Early in the evening, before he became stranded in the search for his car, Jeremiah got into an argument with one of them. Jeremiah was talking to a reporter when an angry woman interrupted, telling him she was tired of people like him burning things down, which, of course, he hadn't done. And he argued he'd done no such thing, and at that time, an armed man came up to him and shoved him. "Be ready," Jeremiah recalls the man saying. "If you come toward us, we're going to open fire." That's some way of putting it. And all he's doing, of course, is standing there and talking to a reporter. And the guy comes up and, a woman comes up and yells at him, gets in his face. He says, "I didn't do what you said," and then just shove. But again, shoving people is really not allowed. You can get, if there's a cop on hand, I suppose, you can get arrested for assault on that one. They usually let it slide. But, of course, it's just another aspect of what they feel they're entitled to do. What are you going to do? Shove me back? I've got a giant gun. Fun people. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, one thing I was rolling through during the break, I'm going to have to see if I can't find this, but thinking about this story that's told here when Jeremiah gets shoved here by the guy who says, "Be ready." Not only, of course, just guns making bullies feel confident about picking fights, whether they think they can win them or not, because of the gun. It's very clear to me that they frequently do that. Just like it's really from reading gun fail stories and others. We run into this all the time. People feel like they can pick fights and get away with it. The gun pulling double duty there. That if the person were to shove them back and then they were to get into a physical altercation, even without the guns, one, you can sort of test your strength against the person you picked the fight with. But if you lose it and you've overestimated your strength or underestimated theirs, you always got backup. You can always go to the gun. And this is a very prevalent attitude among the real gun nuts, is that you can pick a fight and then lose the fight, but then shoot the person who you lost the fight to and claim it was self-defense because that person was fighting you and you feared for your life. Why did you fear for your life? They never drew a gun on you. They had every opportunity if they had a weapon to produce it, but didn't. Maybe you just thought you would be beaten to death with the guy's bare hands. But, happens fairly frequently. And, I don't think any of them really think it's going to come to that. But they're so excited to have the weapon and show it off that they will take every opportunity to do it. If it's concealed, they'll fight until they're losing and then bring it out. And if it's not concealed, they'll just see if they can get away with shoving or punching you and watching you be too scared to shove or punch them back because of the gun. The second role the gun plays, of course, is if the cops show up and they see it strapped to my chest, AR-15, strapped to my chest, military style, they'll arrest the other guy because cops love guns and they know that people with AR-15 strapped to their chest are good guys with guns, not bad guys with guns, like first-degree murderers say. with guns. That only happens later when stupid lawyers get involved and try to convert the heroes into the villains. Anyway, it did remind me of another story, which I guess, all right, maybe it's the more minor of the two. We'll put it aside. When I get back to it, if I get back to it, maybe you'll recognize what the link was, or maybe I will establish it overtly. Let's continue with Jeremiah's story and the other witnesses who were there. Right, so he's just been shoved, and the guy says to him, "Be ready. If you come towards us, we're gonna open fire," which is, that counts as de-escalation of the situation, because very frequently the people holding onto those guns that way don't even bother waiting for you to come toward them. They just open fire once they see you. Anyway, the attitude of law enforcement, Jeremiah noticed, was also different that night. Several people who have attended numerous protests told the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel on Sunday and Monday police had allowed demonstrators to linger in the park, but on Tuesday, what seemed like hundreds more cops than before stood shoulder to shoulder and forced them out. Several armored vehicles rolled through the grass. Jeremiah later watched a video shot late Tuesday night that shows a law enforcement officer in an armored vehicle giving bottles of water to a group of armed men that included Rittenhouse. The officer thanks the men for their help, even though they are clearly civilians. Well, I guess it's not that clear that they're civilians. They're dressed like they're in a militia or an army of some sort, but they say they're civilians, but they are. And, of course, the fact that they're there, handing out water, it never occurs to the cop, hey, it's after 8 p.m., and the reason we were standing shoulder to shoulder pushing people out of the park is there's an 8 p.m. curfew. But these guys seem like nice guys. Let's give them some water. And instead of, hey, go home, there's a curfew, and you're not even from this state, it's, we appreciate you guys, the officer on the video says. We really do. In another clip, an unidentified armed white man in a baseball cap and a ballistic vest, the unofficial uniform of the self-styled militias, says this: "You know what the cops told us today? They were like, we're going to push them down by you because you can deal with them, and we're going to leave." I.e., you get permission to do whatever you want. Now, I don't know whether any cop actually said this. I wouldn't put it past them. This is the word of somebody who's anxious for this to happen, whether it is real or not. So who knows whether they made it up. But we know this much. Kenosha County Sheriff David Beth has said he did not deputize citizens and would never do so. Police Chief Daniel Miskinnis, is that right? Maybe I got it wrong. But anyway, he didn't respond to the Journal-Sentinel's question about whether he was cooperating with the Kenosha Guard. Whether the statement on the video was true or not, Jeremiah believes that was the plan. They were pushing us to the area where the alt-right group was at. Good on you for hanging that label on them. You're probably right. This is what he said of law enforcement. We were cornered. Let's see. Now, on to another story from a different witness. I hope I have this pronunciation right. Is it Mary McKenzie or Mary McKenzie? M-A-R-I-M-A-C-K, all one word. M-A-C-K-E-N-Z-I-A. McKenzie I can make out here, but Mary McKenzie was serving as a volunteer street medic that night, providing first aid to injured protesters. Of Native American and Japanese descent, she decided to take on the role because she hated the thought of people being hurt while they were protesting violence. Earlier in the evening, she'd treated a woman hit in the eye with a ricocheted rubber bullet. And you remember how big and hard those things are. There's very little rubber about them, and they're not the size of the bullet. They're gigantic. Hit in the eye by one, and helped others wash away the tear gas that blurred their vision. Fellow street medic Gage Grosskreutz, I'm guessing again a pronunciation here, Grosskreutz, I don't know how she would say it, was helping people deal with tear gas too. Mary McKenzie, I'm going to say maybe that's more like Mary McKenzie, who knows. I wish I could, I'd call her up and ask her. But anyway, she had spent several evenings working with him, Gage, that is, throughout the summer of protests in Milwaukee and stopped to say hello. A 22-year-old with only 20 hours of street medic training to go with her CPR certification, Mary McKenzie, I guess here, yes, right. She looked up to Grosskreutz, a licensed paramedic. Another guy in the vicinity, one Mary McKenzie didn't recognize, was telling people that he was a medic too, but he made her uneasy because he had an AR-15 slung across his chest. No medic she'd ever worked with carried a weapon like that. Some medics do arm themselves with handguns as a last resort for protection, but their priority was helping people. Usually, they were paired with security teams. Mary McKenzie's medic partner gestured to this young man. "Avoid that guy. He looks like bad news." She would later learn that the man who'd drawn her partner's warning was Rittenhouse. The two walked on. About 10 minutes later, Mary McKenzie heard two men yelling at each other. She couldn't tell what they were saying. Shots rang out. A man fell to the ground 50 yards from her. Before she could reach the man, later identified as Joseph Rosenbaum, 36, a group of bystanders had picked him up and loaded him into a hospital SUV standing by for injured people at the edge of Frottert South Medical Center's parking lot. Hope I didn't mangle the name of the medical center too badly. "Back up!" Mary McKenzie yelled at the crowds trying to live stream the scene. "Give the patient his privacy." She looked into the man's eyes. They were open and motionless. As the SUV carrying Rosenbaum sped across the parking lot to the hospital's back door, Mary McKenzie's medic partner told her the shooter was still in the area. The two medics crouched behind a brick hospital sign, hoping it would be enough to protect them if he opened fire again. Remember, at this point, the guy is indistinguishable from, I'll go on, is indistinguishable from a mass shooter on a rampage at this point. He's a crazy-looking white kid with an AR-15 strapped on, and he's shooting people nearby, and it looks like he was looking to do that to more of them, and in fact, he does end up doing that to more of them. They don't know what they're dealing with here, and when I mentioned that on Twitter, somebody did say, indistinguishable is kind of superfluous there. He is a mass shooter on a rampage, except he only got to shoot 3 people before his shooting spree came to an end, so he wouldn't count as a mass shooter in FBI parlance, but you get the idea. You don't know how many people he shot at that point. All you know is he's roaming the streets shooting people. Why would anybody assume anything otherwise? Her fellow medic, we find out, didn't tell her until later that he'd seen the gunman run past them fewer than 10 yards away. So they're both crouched behind this hospital sign. Would have been nice, probably Gage had said, well, I think we might be okay now. I saw him run away a little while ago. Anyway, Jeremiah saw the shooter flee too, and he could tell the teen was scared. This was the interesting part that reminded me that we wanted to read this article on something that Greg said. Now I can't recall exactly what it was, but this part here. Jeremiah says he knew he messed up. He panicked. Even his people knew what he did was wrong. They were all shouting at him. "What are you doing? What are you doing?" I saw it in their faces. I saw it in their body language. They couldn't believe that one of their number had effed up and actually shot. You're not supposed to at these things. You're just supposed to intimidate people and try and make them surrender their rights themselves, not actually execute them on the street. And, well, that's why he faces first-degree murder charges and the rest of them don't. Rittenhouse lives in Antioch, Illinois, about 20 miles from Kenosha. Although it's still not clear how he got to the scene of Tuesday night's protest, it's not surprising that he decided to go. Rittenhouse considers himself a member of some sort of militia, trying to protect life and property. According to his social media posts and video interviews, hours before the shootings, he stood in front of a boarded-up building for an interview with the Daily Caller. Good job luring him there and keeping him there, Daily Caller. "People are getting injured, and our job is to protect this business," Rittenhouse said on a video of the interview. Like, why it's his job to protect the business. It's not even his, it's not his town, it's not his state. He's not of legal age to, say, be in the armed forces or anything like that. But that's what he thinks about it. So my job is also to protect people by killing them. If someone is hurt, I'm running into harm's way. That's why I have my rifle. I've got to protect myself, obviously, but I also have my med kit. Now, again, he's 17. He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. And so no surprise that he's full of bravado For the camera, he says, my job is to protect people. What he actually did is kill people. If someone is hurt, I'm running into harm's way. Actually, he was running away from it because he had hurt the person. That's why I have my rifle. I've got to protect myself, but I also have my med kit. And now, of course, he's shot 3 people and treated none of them. And by the way, I don't know if I mentioned when the videos initially came out, the fact that he falls flat on his face while he's running away and nearly has his gun torn away from him, even though it's harnessed to his chest, will tell you something important about what it means to just show up and claim, hey, I'm in a militia. If you're going to fall down and even if you're 100% right, I'm protecting life and property from marauding thugs. You just came this close to giving a loaded AR-15 to a band of murderous, marauding thugs, if you were right. Now, of course, they weren't that, and it wouldn't have been a big problem. They were probably going to turn that gun right over to police and say, by the way, this is a murder weapon, and here's your killer. But, unintended consequence of arming yourself, not training, showing up, and cosplaying soldier in the middle of a tense situation that could escalate at any moment, I guess, if you're willing to shoot into the crowd, anyhow, that'll escalate it, is you fall down flat on your face because you're not in shape to run away from a confrontation that you just effed up in, and you just might get caught and beaten senseless and have your weapon stolen. And who knows what else might happen. But no, he did everything right and he's a giant hero. That's the story on the right. Rittenhouse idolizes the police. His social media accounts, before they were taken down on Wednesday, were full of logos and memes supporting law enforcement and showing off his uniform as a member of the Illinois-based Grays Lake, I'm guessing, is it Grays Lake or Grace Lake? How would you say that? And Lindenhurst Law Enforcement Explorer program. Yeah, I'm an explorer, which offers youths an inside look at policing, which they really, shouldn't get. But okay, I guess you could, you could do it as a career day thing, but it's a little out of hand, let's say. Rittenhouse, the middle of 3 children, lived in Grays Lake or Grace Lake for 4 or 5 years, according to a former neighbor who declined to give her name. The children appeared to have a difficult home life growing up. Those kids don't have a chance, she said. Rittenhouse's parents are divorced, court records show. In January 2017, his mother filed for a restraining order against 2 boys at her son's middle school. They had called him dumb and stupid, which is not nice, but I guess wouldn't somebody like that, if they were the ones calling people dumb and stupid and there was a restraining order filed against them, wouldn't they say, that stupid snowflake, they just want a safe space? But not them. That's for you. They had called him dumb and stupid, kind of is, and threatened to kick his butt, court records say. They also had followed him and taken photos of him to post on social media. A month earlier, they had called the family's apartment and told Rittenhouse's mom she needed to watch her son or he would get hurt, she wrote in the court filing. And that's not nice, and you shouldn't do that, but there's a little bit more. Rittenhouse's mother never got the restraining order. She didn't show up for a court hearing, and the matter was dropped. So she might have been full of it, or she may have been such a hard-working woman that she just couldn't find time to make it to her court date. I don't know, but there's evidence to the contrary. Several former classmates at Lakes Community High School in Antioch told Vice News they remembered Rittenhouse as a short-tempered kid and easily offended. Perfect. Give him a weapon. He was known for his love of the police, guns, and President Donald Trump. They said, what a thing to be known for. Jeremiah was near the back of the pack chasing Rittenhouse as he fled the parking lot where Rosenbaum died. Jeremiah was more concerned about getting to his car than he was about trying to catch the gunman. Anthony Huber was near the front of the group. Jeremiah didn't know Huber well, but he had seen him around. A white ally, Huber had participated in June's Black is Beautiful ride, a 16-mile trek to raise money for Milwaukee community groups. At marches throughout the summer, Huber and his skateboard were a near constant presence. He sometimes served as a scout, rolling ahead of marchers and radioing back about police or hazards along the route. The last time Jeremiah saw him, Huber was confronting Rittenhouse, who had fallen as he ran. Those brave souls were the ones who ran toward him trying to grab his gun, Jeremiah said. They were heroes. They were trying to save our lives. They were doing, in other words, what Republicans and other conservatives had advised people do in the case when they are facing what, for all intents and purposes, looks to be a crazed mass shooter intent on mayhem. They were told, why cower in fear? Why run and hide? Why not rush the shooter and try to take him out? So they did. But he was instantly transformed. I guess maybe the reason that they counsel this, and no one could counsel it and think, yeah, that's a pretty good way of handling things, as opposed to, say, trying to pass some common sense gun laws that might have taken the gun out of the kid's hand in the first place. They say, well, rather than confront that uncomfortable reality, everyone should attack the shooter. But by the way, you should know that once you all attack the shooter now becomes the good guy with the gun because he's under attack and he can shoot you in self-defense. Imagine how that would have worked, right? Remember back at our what Greg refers to as the 12-14 shootings in the Sandy Hook school way back when in 2000, was it 12? Yes, I think so. But there were actually conservative commentators who insisted that, the problem wasn't really guns. The problem was that there weren't enough manly men at the school who could have beaten up the shooter, or even thrown, even janitors who could have thrown a bucket at him and taken him out. Or maybe even the huskier 12-year-old boys could have rushed the shooter instead of cowering in fear. Of course, for one thing, there are no 12-year-olds. Those would be sixth graders that this idiot was thinking of. Is a K through 4 school, so there weren't any there. But even so, let's say husky 9-year-olds who are in 4th grade or perhaps 10 years old could have done the job too. Well, I doubt that very much. And also, the shooter in Sandy Hook was in the kindergarten and 1st grade rooms. He wouldn't go and shoot the bigger kids, apparently. They escaped unharmed, except traumatized, of course. But imagine if that had been the case, and our shooter is in there, and so the kindergartners and 1st graders get it together somehow to defend themselves and rush at the shooter, but are cut down because the shooter's got an AR-15, of course, and these kids are 6 and 7 years old. But not only that, I guess just extending the logic, imagine if conservatives had spent the next couple weeks insisting that no, the shooter was he was a bad guy, and sure, what he did before this is we certainly condemn that. But then he in fear of his life. It was self-defense that he was shooting these 1st graders who were trying to stop him. It's the most bizarre possible explanation of things, but they don't care about logic or rules or anything. But I guess next time they tell you about law and order and good guys with guns, the idea that you can instantly they refuse to acknowledge for how many years that a good guy with a gun could instantly transform into a bad guy with a gun. That kind of transformation can't take place. It's impossible. You either go into the situation as a good guy with a gun or a bad guy with a gun. But it is possible for you to transform instantly from a bad guy to a gun with a good guy to a good guy with a gun when good guys without guns try to take your gun away. I told you, gun grabbing is a bad thing in America. They has a right to bear arms and a right to self-defense, and anyone who would stop him, even in the middle of a murder spree, is a bad person and deserves not only to be prosecuted, but we should send federal troops in to arrest them and overwhelm them, and then if their city hasn't yet been burned to the ground, burn it for them, just so that the earlier reports of the city having been burned to the ground can be correct and we don't embarrass the president. That's kind of like where we live at this point, and your Trump-supporting neighbors deserve to rot in hell. There you go. Sorry. Anyway, where we left off was, of course, that Huber, what was his first name? Anthony Huber, the skateboarding scout for protest marches, had caught up to the shooter, and Huber, armed only with his skateboard, rushed at Rittenhouse and hit him with it before being shot in the chest, stumbling a few paces and falling to the ground. That, of course, is the part of the video that all the conservative watched and said, oh, clear self-defense. either ignoring or possibly being completely unaware of the fact that he was being chased down as a suspected crazed mass shooter with an assault rifle. Another man stopped a couple feet away, a handgun and a cell phone in his raised hands. A moment later, he moved toward the gunman again without raising the gun. He was shot in the arm. On a video, the wounded man can be heard shouting for a medic. Rittenhouse stands and walks backwards for a few paces, confirming he isn't being followed, the video shows. Then he turns and walks away. Everyone was yelling, "That's the shooter," Jeremiah said, and the police just let him pass. Beth, the sheriff, has said the officers in the squad cars and armored vehicles Rittenhouse approached with his hands up likely didn't understand the shouts of the crowd due to the noise and chaos. That's probably true. According to his attorney, Rittenhouse went back to Antioch and turned himself in. There's a response from Rittenhouse's attorney here. Is this the one in which he declares himself to have been the first shot of the Second Revolution? No. But his statement, well, you can imagine pretty much what it was, that he was attacked and he was defending himself. As Mary McKenzie, I'll skip over it, not because it's not worth giving the kid his say, but he'll have his chance to do it in court, and you've heard the story already. The right wing is telling it nonstop. As Mary McKenzie, the street medic, left her hiding place near the hospital, she came across a young woman in distress. "Are you okay, ma'am?" Mary McKenzie asked. "Do you need anything?" "No, I'm not okay." It was Huber's girlfriend, Hannah, screaming through her tears. "My boyfriend just got shot." The woman was traumatized but not injured. There was nothing Mary McKenzie could do. Once Mary McKenzie reached her car, she got a text. "Has anyone heard from Gage?" She texted back, not worried about the paramedic she respected so much. "I just saw him 15 minutes ago. I'm sure he's fine." He wasn't. It was Grosskreutz, I hope I was getting his name anywhere close to correct, was the man shot in the arm. With no medics available to respond to his shouts for help, Grosskreutz supervised his own first aid, instructing a man who'd been live streaming the shooting on how to apply a tourniquet. Grosskreutz was wearing a hat and a backpack that identified him as a medic when he rushed toward Huber, according to a close friend who didn't want her name used. And yes, he had a gun because we're allowed to protect ourselves. Even the crazies think that's the case, right? But the gun was down, not pointed, he said. But guess what? The Second Amendment hero didn't recognize the guy's Second Amendment right to be armed, even if he wasn't threatening him with it. He feared for his life because there was a guy with a gun, even though guns are inanimate objects and you're not supposed to fear them. And open carry is supposed to normalize this and yada yada. But, when push comes to shove and they need a gimmitarian defense, they help themselves. His partner medic that night, who had first tried to help Huber, took Grosskreutz to 2 different hospitals, the friend said. At the first, they were asked to clear the waiting room because an injured officer was coming in. From the second, he was airlifted to Froedtert, again, I'm not sure how you pronounce this, F-R-O-E-D-T-E-R-T, in Milwaukee for surgery. Someone local can help me out with that pronunciation. Jeremiah also considers Grosskreutz a friend. "He's a super cool, laid-back guy," Jeremiah said of him. Grosskreutz, of course, it notes here, I don't know why I say of course, but it just happens to be the case that it's noted he's a white guy. He's a great advocate, a great ally, always speaking up for minority groups. He's just that person everybody loves talking to, and he gives great advice. Advice of approaching the guy with the gun, with your gun down, isn't a terrific one, but he's very brave. Mary McKenzie has turned to Grosskreutz for advice, too. She once called him from a Milwaukee protest when she encountered a woman with an open wound and didn't know what to do. Mary McKenzie said she'd never seen him draw his weapon, not even when he was hit by a car driving through the crowd at another protest over the summer. Gage is a very kind and peaceful man, and people who are trying to argue that he's not are just wrong, she said. He never would have pulled that gun unless he thought his life was at risk, and he didn't even raise it up. So, I don't know. Maybe he didn't even think that. Less than 24 hours later, the woman Mary McKenzie saw outside the hospital was back in Kenosha speaking to fellow protesters near the place where her boyfriend had died. He had so much love in his heart for the city, Hannah said of Huber. He took down an armed gunman with nothing but his effing skateboard. I guess she decided to go to that. And then took that effing bullet. Still traumatized by the events of the night before, Jeremiah stood and listened. I think we have to continue to fight, he said later. We're trying to stop a war, not start another one. We're fighting to end racism, fighting for a better future for our kids and our grandkids. I won't let this stop me. There concludes the story of the eyewitnesses to the events in Kenosha that night. Thanks to the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel for bringing us that. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday. But our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio. And now I do remember to go back to the story that I was reminded of as I was reading through the previous one. I guess when I got to the part about the guy who shoves Jeremiah, the woman gets in his face and yells, we're tired of people like you burning everything down, even though that wasn't happening and he had not participated in it anywhere, whether in Kenosha or elsewhere, even if it had happened. And I suppose, I guess at this point it's worth reminding everybody that almost every time they actually find out who lit things on fire or smashed windows, it turns out to have been right-wing provocateurs. Just as people like Kyle Rittenhouse are overexcited and are drawn to the fringes of protest like this for the opportunity possibly to arise for them to use their weapons, and some of them, like Kyle Rittenhouse, don't bother waiting for the opportunity to arise, or guys like the one who shoved Jeremiah while he was giving an interview to a newspaper reporter, looking to create the opportunity to use those weapons. Well, it happens everywhere, and to no one's surprise, this is tied to the same racist tendencies that Greg described in the article that he left us with, discussing the political scientists' findings about the correlations. I mean, it really sterilizes the problem, but that's the job of the political scientist, to try and take that sort of, to take all the real world passion out of it and boil it down to something quantifiable. That's the job. So I understand it. Okay, let's see. What I wanted to add here is this kind of attitude is everywhere, and I think everybody's kind of aware with that of that. But here's a good example of it. Saw this tweeted around by The Hill, so I've grabbed their retelling of it here. Facebook, one of the few instances in which they're willing to try to do anything at all about anybody. Facebook removes GOP lawmakers' post for inciting violence, which is one of the things they're supposed to be doing routinely. And occasionally they get around to removing a particularly splashy example, and then they tell everybody that they did that and how wonderful are they for doing so. And then we all say, too little, too late, but whatever. Christina Marcos, writing here for The Hill, who is this GOP lawmaker? And sometimes they say things like that. GOP lawmaker, and they are lawmakers, but we're talking sometimes about state representatives as opposed to members of Congress. Not this time. We are talking about a member of Congress. Clay Higgins of Louisiana suggested in a Facebook post, and it's a strong suggestion, as Trump might say, suggested very strongly, in a Facebook post on Tuesday, that armed demonstrators in his state, are there any? There were at some point, I think, although actually I'm not 100% certain that they were even in his state. As I recall, they were elsewhere. But you see, they were in a state. And I live in a state, and so therefore I'm going to do this just like Kyle Rittenhouse says. Well, this demonstration isn't going on in my state, but I am the resident of a state. So I should take my weapon and cross state lines and protect businesses, which apparently consisted of a boarded-up gas station, which may or may not have been open for business at that point anyway, but whatever. Here's what Clay Higgins is up to. He suggested in a post on Facebook on Tuesday that armed demonstrators in his state should be met with force, leading the social media platform to remove it for breaking its policies against inciting violence. That is as sterile a retelling of it as possible, but that's not the only retelling of it. She actually does get down into the details. She read the post and she recreates it here. Now, be ready for this, because if you're just warned, well, it says they should be met with force. Here's what it says. In the post on his campaign account, Higgins attached a photo of black men with guns. Yikes, right? They're not allowed to have those. Second Amendment doesn't apply to you guys. Black men with guns, and wrote, "One-way ticket, fellas. Have your affairs in order. Me, I wouldn't even spill my beer. I'd drop any 10 of you where you stand." Now he goes on to say, "But I'm not racist. Nothing personal. We just eliminate the threat. We don't care what color you are. We don't care if you're left or right. If you show up like this, if we recognize threat, you won't walk away." Higgins continued, "Rawr, so sexy when you talk like that, Clay. Gosh." Anyway, so that's, I think that it does say a little bit more than that it should be met with force, and maybe the social media platform should remove it for breaking its policies against inciting violence. It's a direct threat, of course, and I love the attempt at being colorblind. I don't care if you're black or white, if you look like this. You mean carrying weapons that you own legally? Because I don't care if you're black or white, but basically odds are that if somebody is carrying weapons like that, they are white. And there's a lot more pictures of people like that all over the country than there are pictures of black people like that. But gee whiz, the one picture he happened to find, I just was taking a sample, you see, and a representative sample of people walking with guns. I don't like when people walk around with guns, even though I do. If you look like this, isn't that amazing? You know, I don't care whether you're black or white. There's never a picture of the Bundy militia. I don't care if you're black or white or whatever, or from Idaho or Oregon. You know, it doesn't make a difference. You come around here like that, I will invite you to my gun club and we'll drink beer together and look for black people to shoot, is what he really means. But we'll drop you if you look like a threat. That's basically, that's the giveaway right there. If we recognize threat, you won't walk away. How does Clay Higgins recognize threat? My guess is skin color. That's how you can tell. And that's how Clay does it, I guess, right? I mean, it doesn't, when I say look like this, I don't mean the guns. I love guns. But you don't have to be armed for me to shoot you just because you're black, says Clay Higgins. We'll kill you just for being around here, so long as we recognize you as a threat. If I feel threatened, or I'm willing to say in court that I felt threatened, I'll kill you, and maybe 9 others with you, without even spilling my beer, which is a great thing to be drinking while I'm walking around with my gun. I mean, everything is wrong with what Clay Higgins has to say here. And he's a hayseed, hick, and an idiot, and should be kicked out of Congress immediately and chucked down a well. Is that okay to say that? This is not a social media platform, right? So everything's okay. Nothing personal. I'm just saying that. I'm just eliminating a threat. So, you know, everything's going to be fine. And if they delete this from Facebook, I'll be fine with it. I'm not even using Facebook. So it's okay. All right. Higgins further warned people, aggressively natured and armed in my presence, that is where your journey will end. Rawr! It just makes me want to roar when I read his soaring language. Okay, so just, you know, I mean, not that, you know, I think you probably figured this out already, but I will point out the things he's just said are aggressively natured. And it sounds like he's planning to shoot these guys. So he's a bit of a gun nut, at least a gun owner. So anywhere you turn up with Clay Higgins, it sounds like he'll be aggressively natured and armed in your presence. And after all, if you're anything like Clay Higgins, you don't care if he's black or white. You show up like that, you won't walk away. But of course, if you say that, there's federal laws that will protect Clay from those kinds of threats. You're not allowed to do that. And so people will come to visit you, presumably, and arrest you for threatening a federal official. But he feels like he should be able to say that to you with impunity. Now, nothing happens to him legally speaking, but Facebook took his post down. So naturally, this is tyranny. He has lost his First Amendment rights to speak, even though it wasn't the government that told him he couldn't say this. It was a private entity. And the government not only says you're an a-hole for doing it, but I guess you can do it. But on top of that, there's a federal law that says if anybody says that to you, they'll get arrested because you're an elected official. How nice for him. What a cozy little spider hole he's dug for himself. Higgins also confirmed, I missed this part. A Facebook company spokesperson confirmed to The Hill that the post from Higgins was removed for breaking our violence and incitement policies, which is interesting. I mean, I'm glad that they have such a policy. I don't know if they have a policy about removing racist content, but they should. They might not. I don't know. But it would probably be worth mentioning that that was incredibly racist, too. Somebody should have said something about that, and they don't. And I guess it doesn't have the N-word in it, so it's not officially racist, I guess. Higgins also confirmed in a subsequent post, that he had not removed his original message. No, I didn't remove my post. America is being manipulated into a new era of government control, even though no government entered into this situation except the one that I implied would protect him from exactly the same speech from someone else. But he says government control because that's the rhetoric. When you work out of the campaign in a box, it doesn't matter that the government wasn't involved. It's just not exciting if you don't say it wasn't government control. And that's the rote phrase. And you forget to take the word government out of it and put Facebook in instead. But then again, maybe he's ahead of us. He's 2-3 steps ahead of us, and he recognizes that our real government is social media now. He's a very forward thinker, Clay Higgins. Everyone knows that about Clay Higgins. You could tell just from his Facebook post what a progressive thinker he was. Anyway, he continues, your liberty, and that's probably how he says it, liberty is threatened from within, Higgins wrote. Welcome to the front lines, ladies and gentlemen. I suggest you get your mind right. I'll advise when it's time, and he leaves out the word too, but time to gear up, mount up, and roll out. He added, is Clay Higgins a military guy? I mean, it sounds like he's trying to borrow that language, but it would be that much more hilarious if he was not such a person. But let me just go. I'm kind of curious. I'm going to go look at his Wikipedia. Let's see. Clay Higgins, 7th of 8 children, so he got to pretend he was a tough guy anyway. Born in New Orleans, and his family moved to Covington, Louisiana, when he was 6 years old. So, by the way, if you're running against him, you can say he abandoned New Orleans, or New Orleans if you prefer that affect. I can't say it like the real people do. Anyway, family raised and trained horses. Ooh, a horsey set. After graduation from Covington High School, Higgins attended Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Career. At age 18, he enlisted in the Military Police Corps of the Louisiana National Guard, serving for 6 years and reaching the rank of Staff Sergeant. He also worked for several years as the manager of car dealerships, but that's not tough and cool sounding. I guess he became a cop afterwards, and, it's interesting. He's not that old, and I guess he's served in at least 2 different police departments, and that frequently happens when people get kicked out for being out of control. And in fact, I guess it's here. And look at this. So he's got a local law enforcement history. 2004, Higgins changed direction, becoming a patrol officer for the Opelousas City Police Department. By 2007, that department's chief was prepared to take major disciplinary action against Higgins. Now we see what's going on here. In a letter to the city council, he said, Clay Higgins used unnecessary force on a subject during the execution of a warrant and later gave false statements during an internal investigation. Although he later recanted his story and admitted to striking a suspect already in handcuffs and later releasing him. Higgins resigned before disciplinary action could be imposed in September 2016 during his congressional campaign. Imagine running for Congress after this. Higgins claimed to have resigned for other reasons. Gallo, the chief of police, by then retired, disputed Higgins' claim at that time. Higgins next worked for the Port Bar Police Department through 2010. In 2011, he joined the St. Landry Parish Sheriff's Office. That's 3 police departments he's shuffled through here. After the office's public information officer was reassigned in October 2014, Higgins was appointed to that role and promoted to captain. Hooray! As public information officer, Higgins made videos for the parish Crime Stoppers program. He first used standard scripts but began to improvise in his own style. That should be great. Appealing to suspects to surrender and sometimes threatening them by name. His videos went viral, and he was referred to by the national media in 2015 as the Cajun John Wayne for his intimidating persona. Good job normalizing that, guys, because then he went to Congress. Sheriff Bobby Guidroz urged restraint, advising Higgins to refrain from personal comments about suspects and to keep professional tone in his videos. Higgins also made a video for the state police with a script that prompted protests from suspects' families and the ACLU. He resigned from the St. Landry Parish Sheriff's Office in February of 2016. The sheriff there had warned him against using disrespectful and demeaning language about suspects and ordered him to tone down his unprofessional comments in our weekly Crime Stoppers messages. Why not just fire him from that? He issued a statement saying that Higgins' comments underlined a growing undertone of insubordination against police. Why does he hate cops? And a lack of discipline on Higgins' part. Guidroz said that Higgins had gone against department policy by misusing his official badge and uniform for personal profit and gain, citing Higgins wearing a uniform in an ad for a security firm. In addition, he reprimanded Higgins for using his badge and uniform in his personal website to support sales of T-shirts and shot glasses. Great. For his limited liability corporation. He opened up an LLC. In addition, Higgins used the department's physical address in registering that LLC with the state. And both actions were against department policy. Gee whiz. Salon reported in an investigative article during that period, Higgins negotiated paid speaking appearances with other police departments. In one email, Higgins discussed his request for a speaker's fee that included shopping money for his wife and part of the fuel for his friend's private plane. He asked for cash payments. In addition, Higgins conducted his private business via email on his government email account. Everybody's trying to get away from the government email accounts and use private ones. He's going in the opposite direction. But of course, using his government email account during work hours without the permission or knowledge of his supervisors, Higgins also appears to have attempted to conceal his earnings from the IRS in order to avoid wage garnishment for unpaid taxes. He was already cheating on his taxes, caught by the government, so he cheated again so they wouldn't be able to exact his back taxes from him from cheating the first time. This guy is a real gem. Whether those actions constitute tax fraud is unclear. I'll clear it up for you. It does. Shortly after resigning from St. Landry Parish in March 2016, Higgins was accepted and sworn as a reserve deputy marshal in the city of Lafayette, Louisiana. Is that the fourth or fifth? I guess the fourth police outfit he's with, not counting the military police and the National Guard. I guess that would be 5. Reserve forces in city and parish sheriff's offices in Louisiana receive regular training and are commissioned as law enforcement officers. They are part-time and made up of persons from many walks of life, say our Wikipedia editors here. In 2019, Higgins retired his commission as a reserve deputy marshal. He remains an active law enforcement commission as a reserve officer with the Louisiana Attorney General's office. There you go. By the way, he was awarded the title of Kentucky Colonel in March 2016 by Kentucky then Governor Matt Bevin. So I guess he's also, on top of it all, or rather despite it all, been elected to the House for 2 terms now, and, deserves censure for his latest comments. And we're not even done with those, by the way. Where he left off with his saying, I'll advise when it's time to gear up, mount up, and roll out, he added. Right? Remember that? The photo in Higgins' since-removed post was from a demonstration this summer in Louisiana. Does it say? No, it doesn't say, because the demonstration was in Louisville, Kentucky, where a black militia group was protesting the death of Breonna Taylor, who was, of course, shot by police in March. This demonstration, of course, saying, we supposedly also have First Amendment rights to bear arms and to walk around with them openly on display like white people do. What's the reaction from white people, not just white people, but out-of-state white people? Out-of-state white people who are currently serving in the Congress of the United States, safeguarding America's Constitution, except for the part about other people being able to do the things I get to do with additional federal protections, and also, of course, if they're black. And a currently sworn law enforcement officer as well, or at least a reserve law enforcement officer, so protecting our Constitution on the front lines. What does he have to say about this? I don't know. Somehow this is my business, and I will come and kill you for doing that thing which I frequently say every American has the right to do, except if black. But now he got around to declaring the reality, the underlying reality of it on Facebook, and we should expel him, really. But that won't be possible. But you could censure him for that on the House floor. I don't think they're going to spend any time on that. They should. You could say what you will about their unwillingness to do so. But Higgins is a vocal gun rights advocate, of course, and his state allows people to openly carry firearms. So, of course, if the militia group pictured from Louisville were to show up in Louisiana in exactly the same manner, they would be, by law, entitled to do so. But by Higgins' law, would just be murdered, and he wouldn't even spill his beer or his shot glass, depending on what he's carrying at the time he's patrolling with his weapon. The Facebook posts from Higgins came amid protests in Lafayette, Louisiana, over the death of Trayford Pellerin, a black man who was killed by police on August 21st. Another one we haven't even gotten around to, but it's happening all the time, of course. Roughly 40 to 50 armed members of a right-wing militia group who appeared to be all or mostly white men showed up at a peaceful Black Lives Matter demonstration on Tuesday night outside Lafayette City Hall, according to the Acadiana Advocate. It's not the first time Higgins has drawn scrutiny for inflammatory social media posts. And this one brings up a situation we didn't even see, or at least get to, in the Wikipedia entry, because we were talking about his earlier career, but I guess there's more in the Wikipedia thing. Maybe we'll head back to that after this. But here, we'll finish up the Hill article. In 2017, Higgins apologized for filming and posting a video inside a former gas chamber in the Auschwitz Nazi concentration camp. I guess maybe Wikipedia will tell us more about what he might have said about that. That same year, Higgins wrote in another Facebook post after a terror attack in London that, quote, not a single radicalized Islamic suspect should be granted any measure of quarter. Their intended entry to the American homeland should be summarily denied. He knows a lot of big words. Every conceivable measure should be engaged to hunt them down. Hunt them, identify them, and kill them. Kill them all. This is his Facebook post. I'm not adding anything. For the sake of all that is good and righteous, wow, kill them all, Higgins wrote. There you go. It's cool to kill them because it's for things that are good and righteous. That's the end of the Hill article here. Let's skip back over to this still fascinating Wikipedia profile of him. Now on to the section about his service in the U.S. House of Representatives. Let's read about his 2016 campaign. After Higgins' resignation from the St. Landry Sheriff's Office, Chris Comio, I don't know how they pronounce it. Comeaux. You know that. I understand the Frenchified pronunciation of the ending. Como? Really? I mean, I guess so, right? A Republican campaign staffer recruited Higgins to run for office. So it's that guy's fault. You should find him and blame him. In May of 2016, Higgins declared his candidacy for the 2016 election to represent Louisiana's 3rd congressional district and build on his name recognition that he had gotten away with at the sheriff's office, even though the sheriff kept telling him, you got to stop, this is totally unprofessional. So that was apparently name recognition for him. He crossed district lines to run for this seat, as he resides in the 5th congressional district. Higgins was supported by a super PAC, Political Action Committee, of course, headed by Senator David Vitters, former chief of staff. Higgins finished in second place in the nonpartisan blanket primary held on November 8th behind Republican Scott Angel, and I don't know how he pronounces it, Angel with an extra L-E on the Angeli? I don't know. Anyway, in which nearly 68% of the parish voted. It's a very heavy turnout. He faced Angeli, I'm guessing, in a runoff election on December 10th and won with 56.1% of the votes cast. Turnout had declined, though, by that point to about 28% of voters. So that's how he snuck in. Pretty amazing. Sworn in, of course, with everybody else, as though nothing was wrong with the guy, on January 3rd, 2017. They probably should have refused to seat him, but they didn't go that far. He has said that he sleeps on an air mattress on the floor of his Capitol Hill office, another one of those guys. He works out and showers in the House gymnasium in the early morning. I'm working out! And mooching off the government, too. So this guy has been on the government payroll pretty much his entire life, except for the time that he was working in a car dealership. That was the only private sector work that he could get, I guess. And since then, public dole right up to housing in Washington, D.C. Never did really agree with the people who were mooching that kind of services off of the House. But anyway, it happens. Let's see. Anything else? Yeah, now this is on to his voting record, which, as you can imagine, sucks pretty badly. Anything outrageous? Don't think so. Then committee assignments, more on political positions, but I think you get the idea. Oh, here's the Auschwitz video story. In early July 2017, Higgins posted a 5-minute video on YouTube from Auschwitz concentration camp, including a section from within one of the gas chambers. He said, "This is why Homeland Security must be squared away, why our military must be invincible." This video was widely condemned as inappropriate, including by the Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial and Museum, whose spokesman wrote in a Twitter post that the building should not be used as a stage. Higgins later removed this video from YouTube and issued an apology. Just, thought I'd throw that out there. Anything of particular interest in his personal life? Sure, and that's short, too. Let's just run that down. Higgins' ex-wife, Rosemary Stormy, that's her nickname. I know another Stormy Rothkamp Hambries, then living in Mississippi, filed suit against him the day after the 2016 election, should have done earlier, for unpaid child support of more than $140,000. This guy's a real winner, including interest on overdue payments. Higgins said that he sought reduced payments in 2005 after changing careers to law enforcement, but the issue was never settled. The Daily Advertiser reported calls about the case made by this newspaper in September, first to the Texas Attorney General's office, then to Louisiana courts, brought similar responses from both places. Clay Higgins was not in trouble with the courts in either state over the child support payments. So take that for what you will. I would say he goes in the bucket with, what's that guy's name? Scott DesJarlais. About as loathsome as it comes in congressional Republicans, but they accept that sort of thing in their ranks and have no shame about continuing to welcome them among them. So I guess that's not anything we're going to be able to solve anytime soon, but deserving of censure in my view. Let's see, before we hop out of here, one more note from Greg here from a tweet from Norm Ornstein, saying we now have 2 precedents for changing the rules with a simple majority without getting too arcane. It involves challenging a rule, requesting a ruling from the chair, and then voting on the chair's ruling. Yes, okay. Well, not much we knew, but I thought just a clarification that we would throw in there. But okay, we can revisit that tomorrow because we'll be back. Greg can't revisit it until Monday, so he'll have to suffer all weekend. In the meantime, Justice Putnam up next with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy to bring you all these stories that's still in pocket and in my Twitter feed that we didn't get to because we chose for a more arcane sampling. Here's what he's got in store for you. A combative Bill Barr got totally pissed while brazenly lying about election law and mail-in ballots. That's par for the course. Also up, a second Trump appointee is out at the FDA amid a botched announcement about an experimental therapy for COVID-19. A Minnesota biker is the first reported Sturgis motorcycle rally fatality from COVID-19. I'll be listening about that one. And after struggling for decades with racism and white supremacists, Arkansas communities endorse a hate crimes law effort. So congratulations to people working on that effort in Arkansas. Good luck to you. I hope you can get it
From
squared
Daily
away.
Co's Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Don't forget, Justice also gives time to these international issues. We got to catch up on this one. Belarusian, how will we say it, journalists facing charges for covering the massive protests there. Charges for covering protests. And the U.S. blacklisted the ICC, International Criminal Court prosecutor, over her probe of possible American war crimes in Afghanistan.